Bom dia a todos, sejam bem-vindos
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our earnings release for the third quarter of 2022. It's a pleasure to be here with you, speaking with you on the results of this quarter. Today, I'm Sérgio Ribas, and I'm the CEO at Irani. I also have Ojivam Khan. He is our financial director and investor relations. We have Henrique Zuckerman, which is the paper and forestry business director, and Lindomar, which is our business director for packages. So some instructions on this webinar. This meeting is following a webinar model where all participants have their microphones and videos off, but we'll start off with the presentation of the results in the quarter and the year, and at the end, we'll have some Q&A time. The questions can be submitted through the Q&A tool, through the chat, and we can also open up your mic if you'd like to submit your question. And this meeting will also be providing simultaneous translation into English. You can just select this interpretation option. And the webinar will be recorded and provided in both languages on our IR website. So let me share my screen with the presentation, just one moment. So now, as we present our earnings, this was a quarter that was very positive in results. We were able to keep up a EBITDA margin and a corrugated cardboard margin that was really interesting. We were also able to keep up with this consistency quarterly in our earnings, which is something that has been going on in the past quarter. So in the last 12 months, we had growing numbers, and we had a net revenue in the past 12 months of 1.692 million. This is 14.1% more than the previous year. We also had an adjusted EBITDA in the past 12 months of 552,933, 31% compared to the period last year. And our leverage, although it is in a phase of about 70 or 80% of the first projects that we've been executing. We'll see this up ahead with the percentage for the execution of each of these projects, but we are keeping up a leverage that is really very conservative of 1.18 even during this phase of the execution of the Gaia platform projects. Our ROIC in the past 12 months was 24.5%, way above average in industry at a national level and international level. We also had a net income of 355 million in the past 12 months. This is 39% higher than the profit in the previous 12 months. And the cost of debt in the past 12 months was 14% a year. And we also performed 613 million, 0.55 of the investments in the Gaia platform until the 30th of September. So when we start discussing specific quarter results, we had an operational revenue of 441 million, 2.1% higher than the revenue we had in the third quarter of 21. The EBITDA is 137,368, which is 2.1% lower than what we delivered in the third quarter of 21. And we'll see the main reasons for this being slightly lower, and profit that's also really strong, 95,530,000, also 2.1% lower than what we delivered in the third quarter last year. And the specific investments in this quarter in the Gaia platform also represent about 97,272. So when it comes to revenue, we had an evolution compared to the second quarter of 2.9% and 2.1% in relation to the third quarter. The EBITDA had a drop compared to the third quarter of 2.1% and a drop compared to the second quarter of 5.1%, but at a very good level of results and 31.1% EBITDA margin, which is what we've seen as the consistent EBITDA margin at this new moment we see in the paper and cardboard industry with these trends for the substitution of other materials, which is still very strong, and the actual e-commerce, which despite a slight drop in growth, continues to have strong growth and expectation for growth that's very positive in the next years, which should, at the end of the day, provide consistency to these results that we're looking at in the last quarters. And we do consider this to be very optimistic when we consider the next quarters. The net income was 95 million, 512.9% higher than the second quarter, and slightly lower, 2% lower than the third quarter of 21. When we start discussing corrugated cardboard and we assess the overall market, we had a growth that was very significant of 3.9% in the third quarter of 21 to the third quarter of 2022. So this is robust growth in the sector. And we were able to have in the third quarter a drop compared to the first and second quarter last year. But the third quarter, month over month, have expectations that are higher for corrugated cardboard than what we had in the last year, which was already a very strong quarter and semester. So we had a growth of 8.6% and 3.9 compared to the same period last year. When we look at revenue in square meters, about 4% higher and 8.3 in the overall market. In our case, we had growth that was a lot better, 14.9% compared to the third quarter, 14.5% in the second quarter, and 45,759 tons of cardboard shipped. Here, it's important to highlight that we are already implementing the Gaia 2 project, which is an expansion in the Santa Catarina unit that's pretty much complete. And all of these volumes and growth that we've had with corrugated cardboard with such a high rate are already new volumes that are starting with the new capacity for the unit in Santa Catarina. And with this, we're gaining some market share, and growth is, of course, way above the growth in the market. So when we take a look at the square meters, the growth was 11% and 13.7% compared to the second quarter of 22. When we take a look at the average prices, for cardboard, they had a drop compared to the third quarter of 2021 of 7.2%, and in regards to the second quarter of 0.8. So there was a correction in prices in the overall market after the drop in the scraps, especially at the end of last year, and there was a correction throughout the first semester. But in the third quarter, we did have some price stability with a beginning of a slight increase in prices in the past month, and the fourth quarter months, we should also have an increase in prices that are going to be transferred in the market as a whole to be able to replace the inflation in the period. So when we look at this square meters, a drop of 0.8%. And when we look at the segment for paper, Sergio, yes, of course. I just would like to highlight that this is also related to the ramp up of the packages in Santa Catarina. Yes, this drop in prices recently, which 7,457 to 7,394, considers a series of transfers of prices that were implemented due to this increase that's underway. But there's also the entry of new volumes in Santa Catarina, which are mainly volumes from major accounts, especially due to the increase in capacity in the unit in Santa Catarina, where you have a real cluster of animal protein factories in the Santa Catarina region, which makes the average price have a drop. And although the margins are good, prices are a little lower than average in the overall portfolio, which ends up making the prices also have this drop due to this reason. On the other hand, you have a significant growth in volumes. And then in the paper segment, which is the paper we saw in the market for converters, independent players, for bags, in the domestic market, but also with exports, we had a drop in sales compared to the second and third quarters, which is mainly due to operational performance, shutdowns, the machines that we had in the third quarter, and also included a bit of the shutdown in machine 2. Most of this was in the month of October. However, there were a few months in the month of September. So for papers and flexible packages, we did have a drop due to these shutdowns. The market overall is very demanding in paper. But due to the investments, we did have some shutdowns on machines that kind of harmed this total volume of sales in the quarter. And then also for rigid packaging, we've been selling less paper for this in the market due to the growth of corrugated cardboard in our factory. So this drop in sales for stiff packaging is really related to the volume of corrugated cardboard at our units, and the average prices for flexible packaging have had excellent performance. They grew 15% compared to the third quarter last year, and 5% compared to the second quarter of 22. So we already have a price recovery process underway for flexible packaging, and this is of course consolidated in this quarter and in the next. And we've also had a slight increase in the prices of packaging due to the increase in the scraps. They had a significant drop in the end of the year, and this year they also had a slight growth due to seasonality, but this has already been covered here also in the stock we sell in the market. When we take a look at the scrap prices, as I mentioned, there was a drop in the third quarter of 21 to the second quarter of 22. So it was very significant, a slight increase in the third quarter that I referred to, which was also one of the reasons why the margins were a little lower due to this recent increase in scraps, which we don't see room for an increase in prices for the scraps. There should be some drops actually and a pressure for drop at the end of the year for the scrap prices. But this, of course, impacts the margins and the price replacement and recovery that's underway, which is going to be consolidated by the fourth quarter. So here you have a drop of 39%, and in our case, it's a bit greater, 790 reais per ton, which would be our cost of scraps. When we take a look at this, looking at the CIF, we have a drop of 44% at Irani in Santa Catarina and Minas Gerais, 39.5, and the consolidated number, we have a drop of 43.3 of 829 reais per ton. So the resins, the rostins are something that really suffer with the commodity prices. They're international commodities, and thus they have volatility in prices that are very significant in the overall business. And we did have some seasonality drops in the volume of sales, and also the average prices of turpentine and rostin that had a very significant drop in this quarter, which slightly harm the results and earnings in this quarter, although it is a smaller business that represents less than 10% of our overall revenue. Then getting into the financial matters, as I mentioned in the beginning, we kept a leverage position that was very controlled, even in this period with investments that dropped. It went up to 1.18 and a total debt of 1,048,000 with a total of 398 million cash and 649.7 of a net debt. 96% in national currency, 4% in foreign currency, 70% long-term, and 22% short-term. Our ROIC was also kept at a very high level of 24.5%, and this is slightly due to capital allocation, and even the EBITDA drops in this quarter, which affect the average ROIC in the company. So now here you had some information. We executed our buyback program in 2021. We canceled 10,360,116 shares, and we completed that program. But now we opened up a new program since we know that the shares still don't represent the intrinsic value of the company at the moment, as well as the investments that are starting to bring in positive results, especially with Gaia 2 and 3. And we'll get into this up ahead. So that's why we decided to have a new buyback program that's underway. And as we work on what is adequate, we'll be buying back shares and, of course, compensating our investors even more as each one's stake becomes greater with the buyback programs. So this month we had a public issuing, which was a CRA financial instrument. It was 80.2% registered and signed in from individuals. It was the fifth green debenture issuance, and it was backed up 721 million. And this is an important green CRA public offering. This operation was very successful. We initially considered only 600 million, but we were able to have 20% additional due to a demand that was a lot higher than the actual value of the offering. So this is also an initiative related to liability management, as we'll be able to really improve the average cost of debt with the entrance with this input of resources and funds, and of course will help fund some other investments for the Gaia platform and giving us greater liquidity, which is so important during this period at the end of the year and beginning of next year. So paying dividends, we've been paying this quarterly, and these dividends represent about 25% of the profit in the period. And we also pay at the beginning of the year with the 25% additional, as long as our leverage is below 2.5 times. We have been keeping up this leverage also, as we mentioned, in a very conservative range, even in an investment period. And with this, during this period, we had the payment of 160 million in dividends, if we consider the last 12 months, 0.64 per share, which leads to a dividend yield of 10.33%, considering the share price of 6.24 related to the closing in the 30th of September 2021. Well, very well. Moving on to the Gaia platform. I don't know if anyone else has anything to contribute with on dividends and the issuance. No, it's all very clear. Thank you. We can move on. So the Gaia platform, we approved these two cycles of investments in the platform. The three first projects, of course, are projects that do have more relevant returns and that are at a phase of execution that's quite advanced. We also have Gaia 4 and 5 that are at a final phase for licensing, so we can start their execution. And then the others are smaller projects in this cycle of investments that are all within the normal planned deadlines for these projects. When we consider the approvals of the investments of 975 million and a net investment of 814 net of taxes, of course. And in the third quarter, we delivered 97 million invested, and overall 613 million of the 975 that we had approved initially. When we look at the physical execution of the project Gaia 1, which is a project with the recovery boiler and wood, as well as the digesters and paper and pulp work, which is the investments that have the highest returns. We already have 66.5% of the total execution of the physical construction project, and we should complete this by the first semester next year, and of course capture the returns of this project from the second semester next year. So it's a phase that's very much advanced in this execution. Embalagem Santa Catarina also has some automation items that we're missing still, and we're going to be completing this till the end of the year, but the project is ready. The new printers and that we retrofitted as well, and we already have the additional volumes in-house within the performance curve. Of course, we still have some challenges with the corrugators that we have to look into, but the volumes did come in a lot quicker than we imagined, leading to returns that are probably going to be higher than what we initially planned. And then the refurbishing of machine 2, we had a shutdown in the end of September, and this took about 3 weeks. The machine started off in October very well. It was a real harmonious process within expectations. The machine already has very good performance. And of course, this is all within the learning curve. It's a machine that is practically new. Very few equipment were kept in the older machines. That's very good and very much focused on paper for packages and bags, and we do expect to have returns that are a lot higher than what was initially expected due to the performance of the machine and speed that we're already reaching with the machine after this shutdown work. We've already reached an all-time high in production, and we're going to be having successive increases due to the increase of capacity, but we already had our first record in production, which demonstrates the machine is doing very well. All of the PCHs are also undergoing licensing work, and so we're going to have a third PCH as well. We should be approving up ahead in this project, and these smaller projects with all of the sensors and 4.0 industry elements already have about 55% done. The expansion of ETE, which is a structural project that's very important for the paper factory, it's also moving along very well. It's a project we're going to be completing by next year. The new printer and automation of our intermediate inventory in stock. This machine is already almost arriving in Brazil. It's coming from Taiwan, and also the automation of the intermediate stock, which is already completely hired and under execution with the equipment and manufacturing of the equipment, which should reach us in mid next year for the automation of all the Andaiatuba factory. Besides these projects, we have others that are being studied, and as soon as we do have engineering and precise values with returns, we will be approving this with the strategy committee and a board and disclosing this to the market. So here we have the execution of all the projects within expectations, completely in line with the deadlines and timeline we disclosed to the market, and expectations actually when it comes to Gaia 1 to have the startup of the project in the beginning of the first quarter, and of course already start having returns in the second semester this year. So we had our investor day as well, our second edition actually. We had a virtual one last year, but this one was at our Indaiatuba unit. It was a very interesting event. We were very excited with the possibility of welcoming our investors. We spoke about the company as a whole, all of our projects and the studies underway. We had the opportunity to also have investors getting to know our operation there and all of the board. It was a moment that was really rich for interaction and presenting the company to the market in a completely transparent manner. So we were very happy with the results, and the repercussions were very positive as well with this project in the overall market. Odivan, do you have any comments on the Investor Day? Yeah, I just wanted to say that it was also broadcasted live on YouTube. So a lot of people were able to participate online. And as we organize other investor days, more and more people will be able to come and participate in person as well. And it was a great event. So of course our recording is also available on the IR website. And if you haven't seen it, you can definitely access it and you'll have all of the content available. So some awards we received as well in this quarter that really made us very proud. We were positioned as the best company in the paper and pulp category in the Maiores e Melhores award. Last year we were in second place, and this year we're in first place. It's very a well-known award, and it assesses financial performance as well as best practices from a social, environmental, and governance perspective. So we were really happy to have this recognition. And we were also able to have recognition for the second consecutive year of the Transparency Trophy among the 10 companies with public balance sheets that are also very well known in the market with the greatest transparency. We have Odivan and Evandro with our accounting manager also receiving this award, which is something that made us very proud due to our approach of really providing transparency for the company as a whole and our relationship with the market, with the customers, and all of the stakeholders. We always try to be very transparent because we understand that trust can only be built through transparency and through acknowledgement of the other person in these relationships we keep up. We were also positioned with for the first time among the three most innovative companies, the Valor Inovação Award. We had already received that from the Innovation Award by Revista Exame as well. And of course, we also had some ESG best practices. We participated in the SDG in practical terms event where we presented our diversity and case, which is essential. We also had the, trash, it became art. With a special competition and musical presentations using recyclable materials with over 500 students and 180 teachers in Santa Catarina with a strong relationship with schools for environmental education. And together with Chalingo, we also issued a educational edition of a game manufactured with raw materials that are renewable with antimicrobial technology, and it's called Playing to be an Engineer with Eco Paint, and we use paper with this antimicrobial technology we developed, and it makes these products super safe for kids to play with in a very educational way. Then we have everyone from Investor Relations, Ojivan, as the captain of this team, together with André, our Investor Relations Director. We have Mari, Ciani, Vincenzo, Daniela, Marquinhos as well, our finance manager, Evandro and Giovanna, which is our new business analyst from IR. And everyone's available to provide any kind of clarification, answer any questions, and uh, any additional information required. So to give you an overview, this is the main information about our quarter. As I mentioned, it was a quarter that was very positive when it comes to consistency in the results of the previous quarters. And of course, the expectation that we'll have other quarters that are equally as good with the new ones coming along when it comes to price transfers throughout this quarter. Now we're going to be opening up to questions. Well, Sergio, I think you can start organizing this. We have this on chat and via Q&A, and I'll be sharing this here to add them to the queue. The first one's from Caio from BTG, and he has two questions. So first, we noticed there's a small drop in the revenue per ton in the corrugated cardboard line in the quarter. You mentioned that this could be related to the expansion in Santa Catarina, and I imagine that due to a temporary worsening in the mix. Could you mention the size of this impact in the quarter and how we can look at this evolution in the next quarters? Along with this, I would also, how are the negotiations with pricing with customers? Are you granting any discounts, or have you been able to transfer the inflation rates? That's the first question. And the second question is if there's some impact on the paralyzation and the truck drivers that are blocking the roads in Santa Catarina. Well, we had an increase of about 1,500 tons overall in the volumes due to the expansions in Santa Catarina so far. But these volumes naturally have prices that are a little below average, and that worsens the mix. But impacts are slightly dropping, small, because the fact they have lower prices does not mean that the carbon contribution margin is smaller. Because when we talk about Santa Catarina, there are more significant volumes that are more productive in the factories. There are boxes with major volumes, and of course, they generate more of an impact in the conversion. So it's difficult to say if there's a drop in margins in these additional volumes. If there is, it's very small. So the volumes that we have are already in-house. As the corrugator performs better and becomes, and of course, the corrugator is the main bottleneck in the unit. So as it performs better, we'll be able to have more volume. So there is a very strong demand from our own customers. And with this, we've anticipated the curves in South Catarina that were expected to take place throughout 3 years. So we're anticipating this curve, and this will bring in very important results for the project and the next quarters. So about transfers of prices, this is happening. We've had negotiations that are very difficult, especially in these major accounts, especially due to the big amount of transfers that existed in the past 2 years and the margins in the overall chain. But we've been successful. We've been successful, and we will most likely have a perception in the better increase in the third quarter because we won't have that many additional volumes in Santa Catarina, and the negotiations are underway at this moment. So we've been able to transfer an important amount of the price for sheets and also for boxes. It depends on each item, each margin range, so that we can negotiate this without risking the volume. So that we can start 2023 with the reestablishment of the entire portfolio. And on the truck driver strike, it's been affecting us slightly. We ended the revenue last month yesterday, and there was no harm due to this strike. But of course, now we have our eyes open because, especially in Santa Catarina, at the exit of our factories and operations. But so far, this has not led to any relevant impact. Great. We have many different questions. The next one comes from Paulo. Hi, Paulo. And he's saying, look, in the previous meeting, you mentioned that you had noticed a positive transfer in prices. However, there was a drop. Is the market weaker? Is the growth in production due to taking place in major clients with smaller prices? Could you explain this a little better? And then he adds on and he says that the question is related to the past, but the objective is also to understand if there's a future perspective for growth along with the stability, reduction or increase in prices, and based on what you're looking at in the market. The market has a strong demand. We've had actually been producing more and more every month compared to last year's. So this is all making it possible for us to transfer prices throughout the quarter and the semester. And however, um, our specific drop in prices is a lot more related to the increase in volumes that we had in Santa Catarina than an actual drop in prices at our customer sites. So this is a worsening in the mix due to the increment in volumes due mainly because of the Guide 2 project that increases the capacity in the unit in Santa Catarina. So I'm not seeing much of a trend in price drops. I've seen actually that the market's been getting involved to cover the margins in the period. And in a consolidated amount of the market, we should see an increase in prices in this quarter and the next as well, with in a stronger way with an increase in prices replacing inflation. So what else do we have in that question? Well, we have Vitor also asked, he raised his hand, and if maybe Mari can open up the mic for Vitor, and then he can submit any questions. Hi, guys. Good morning. My question is really in line with the previous questions from about Gaia 2, and you answered that very well, but I just wanted to know about the ramp up in volumes. You mentioned that you had an expectation of having this around 3 years, and since demand's pretty well, how much can we expect for it to be like 100% operational? And as you mentioned, this is probably not going to affect the prices with the additional volumes, but in regards to this, how much additional do you have as volumes? And the second question would be about the Rawsons, where you had this seasonal issue now, and I wanted to know how you're looking at demand for the next quarters. I think in the past this was very strong, and this quarter it even affected a bit of the comparison basis. So I think that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. Well, I think the corrugated cardboard issue is what I mentioned today. We have our capacity in Santa Catarina pretty much covered um, with the current performance of the corrugator, but the corrugator has a performance curve. So it started off in the beginning of this year, and it's going to, throughout the year, gain more productivity as you have an improvement in the scheduling for the projects, and as you guarantee that the actual equipment is more aligned and the teams are more familiar with this new machine, and all of this is going to lead to more productivity. So this productivity additionally will bring in more volume. So of course, we still have, in regards to the project, about 1,000 tons that can still be captured throughout the next year with the performance of the corrugator, but probably 500 tons in a quicker period. And the other 500 will be that fine tuning work you're going to be doing on the equipment over time. And then the last tons finally would be a little more difficult and take a little more time because it depends on the corrugator's performance. But what we currently have as availability with the current performance of the machine is already sold. And of course, that's anticipating a curve we imagined would be a little slower. So the overall market, as I mentioned, it has strong demand. These incentives, monetary incentives from the government with the emergency support and Corona vouchers, etc. And this helps a lot with and this, of course, affects our case where most of our products are sold for the food sector. Almost 70% of our volumes are sold to animal protein brands and other products that have having very good performance. And these monetary stimulus should continue with the emergency income from the government that should remain in the new government as well. And these will, of course, help. Oh, yes, and unemployment dropping as well, which should also contribute to the salary levels and consumption of food items and corrugated cardboard as a consequence. The next point, sorry, there was a second point, Ojibam. It was about the
Isso, é,
Rawson's
esse é um
segment,
plano
right?
de longo
So
prazo.
this is something that
Mas
he
me
could
diz uma coisa,
contribute with. It's
você já
seasonal.
chegou
It's an
a
international
comentar com
commodity, and
alguém
it's really
também
affected by
que
this
de
worldwide
alguma forma
dynamic, China, Europe, and
fez
it's
uma
very
previsão
difficult
com
to
todas
have
as
a forecast on this
variáveis nesse
clearly.
processo?
There are so many variables
Se
in the
você
process,
imagina que
but
haja
we did notice a
a
recent
demanda
drop
mundial,
in the worldwide
mas
demand, but
não podemos cravar que isso não muda
we can't
rapidamente, né?
define that
Porque
this is not going to
tem
change
necessidade
quickly
de
because, of
existem
course, there is
investimentos
a need for
eh,
Rawsons, especially
de florestas,
those
né,
coming
que
from
são
forests,
sustentáveis e
which are
tal, e
sustainable
para
Rawsons. There's a
esse tipo de produto.
demand that's greater in
Também
Europe
é
for
uma
this kind of
demanda
product. So it's a
que
demand
não é
that
consolidada
is
nos
not
próximos meses
consolidated
em
for the
função
next
do cenário
month
mundial.
due to this
Alguém
worldwide
quer complementar
dynamic.
isso tudo?
And Hiki, do you want to contribute with anything else? No, I think that's pretty much it. This market, when you look at it from a short term, it may seem to be dropping too much or going up too much, but you have to look at this market with a higher horizon. When you look at this broader horizon, it really is firm and profitable. And there's just these worldwide adjustments issues that are being that are taking place in the northern hemisphere that will affect us a lot because our products are 100% exported. But so it may affect the demand and the offering and the currency variables. But the demand is already a little bit better than what it was like last month. So that's an important sign in our experience in this market that we've been in for many, many years. It's not the first time we're looking at a drop in the market and then soon after growing very strong. So it's quite normal to have this dynamic in this market with this up and down
A
situation.
volatilidade desse negócio
Uh,
pode sair um pouco maior,
so
né?
this volatility is a little greater.
E a
And
próxima aqui, a Helena havia levantado um
the
ponto
Elena
importante
had
nesse
raised her
sentido.
hand as well,
Eu vi que você colocou
and
alguns
she
exemplos aí
mentioned that she wanted to say something. Do you want me to read your question, or do you want to speak? Well, can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you.
Tá bom.
Okay, great.
Todas as perguntas
So I think a lot of questions are
estão
already
aqui,
submitted, but the main one
mas eu
here
gostaria de
is
entender
that we would
melhor
like to understand more
como vocês
about
enxergam
how you're looking at
a
this
redução de
issue
custo
with
e de
the
margem
cost
no
reduction and
Gaia
margin
geral, assim,
gains
em
with
alguns
Gaia
projetos que
overall.
vocês citam lá,
And
alguns
so there's some projects you
sobre custos mais
mentioned
diretos, como
with
os
cost
projetos com
reductions that are a little more
energia.
direct, with
Seria legal
such as
entender um pouco
projects with
mais
energy, but
esses benefícios gerais
it would be
envolvidos
great to know how you're
na
looking at
redução
the
de custo.
general benefits and some other factors such as
Sem
cost
dúvida.
dilution.
O
Well, yeah,
projeto
for sure.
já
Anyways, this
está
project
quase com 100% de
is
execução, são
those that
projetos
are already almost
que
100% executed
são
are
altos de
projects
capacidade,
with the increase of capacity.
interiores e também a
And
região de
so
Santa
also
Catarina.
the
Também
units in
esses
Santa
projetos
Catarina. And
têm um risco
these
de
projects
retorno
had
um pouco
a
maior do
risk for
que,
return that was a little higher because it
projetos
depends on the overall market. But thankfully, the Santa Catarina
concorrência
project
deles,
is kind of in
e a
the front of the
demanda por
curve,
papéis
and the
pacíficos
demand
é
for
extremamente alta.
paper
E
for
nós somos o
bags is still
principal
really high, and we are the
fornecedor
main
no mercado.
supplier
Então,
of this
a gente
product in the
vai
market. So
rapidamente
we will
ocupar essas
quickly
capacidades
occupy
e o
these
retorno desses
capacities and
projetos. A
have
única
the
coisa
returns on
é
these
se a gente
projects.
fazer
So
previsão
machine
de
two
volumes
is
para
just about
chegar
the performance
bem
curve,
superior
so we
ao
can
que
reach a
você
position that's a
prevê.
lot higher than what we had previously.
Já nesse mês,
And
que é o mês
in this month,
de
which is where you have the
finalização do
startup of the
trimestre,
machine, we should have a production
este mês é
way
maior.
above
A gente
the
espera que
what we had in the last month before
e
the
esse número vai se consolidando cada vez
refurbishing.
mais
And
ao
this
longo dos
number is going to be
próximos
consolidated month over
meses,
month,
porque a
but we
demanda
won't have a
ela
difficulty for the
continua
sale of
muito
this
alta,
product. So because the
dada
demand
a
continues,
lógica que
and of course, it's
esse
within
negócio de subsídio
this
de
logic
materiais
of the
vai gerar
subscription of materials. So
movimento no
we're looking
mercado,
at
não
this
só o
movement, this trend in the
crescimento,
market, not only with the growth of
mas a
corrugated cardboard,
substituição de
but also the
itens de outros
substitution of some
revestimentos
items
de
for many of
plástico
our
que estão
customers
tentando
that use
substituir o papel.
plastics and other materials, trying to substitute these
Demandas,
by
e
paper.
isso
So
tem
we've
se
had some demands, and
centralizado
this is
para
being
o
strengthened more and more.
que o
And so
nosso
the
mercado
prognosis
parcial
for
de
the overall
papéis está
market
é muito bom.
for paper, for packages, is very positive.
Então, a venda
And
dessa
the
capacidade de
sale of this
funcionamento já
additional capacity
já está
machine
dada
two
também.
is already
Então, é um
considered
pouco
as
mais de
well.
performance
And it's a lot
operacional,
more
um pouco
about
mais
operational
parado,
performance with the
considerando
machine and the shutdowns and actual
que é um
market issues. So
projeto
Gaia 1,
tem
which is the
mais
project that has
são
greater
previsões de operação
content for cost reduction, is a
até
project
o
that's
final
going
do
to
primeiro
be
semestre
ready
do ano que vem.
by the end of the
E
first
aí,
semester next
proporcionando
year.
os benefícios
And then the cost
que
reduction in
a gente
energy
vai
and
passar aqui em Santa Catarina para nossos
We're going to stop buying energy for the Santa Catarina unit. That's our biggest site. We're going to have expansion in pulp production about 30%. And this bigger production pulp will give us the conditions to sell more paper using virgin fiber. And there's already demand for this actually, but we don't have more pulp. So we've sold paper for corrugated cardboard, but we don't have fiber for this. And that's why with this increase, we're going to have the conditions to have more paper with virgin fibers, which have margins that are a lot greater than those made with recycled fiber. So this is, of course, in segments we're already operating in with paper for bakeries and other papers that have add value and great margin. So this return, especially that's going to be happening, is going to take place from the second semester next year. Great, perfect. So now we have Luis Gustavo and some other questions here as well. It's already 12:40, but Luis Gustavo, how is it? How are you? Could you talk about the use of the resources obtained with the CRA financial instrument? Are you going to use this to amortize debts with higher costs? Well, the CRA was captured, and the resources are basically to fund forestry activities in the company during the 7 years of the CRA thrush. So these resources have this objective, and we issued a debenture that was backing up the CRA. Who actually issued it was Ecos Securitizadora, but the resources were sent to us in our cash, and they're in our available for us. And so the objective is to be able to have these forestry investments over this period, but we manage the money in the best way possible. And from now on, and now we're going to be adjusting the best purposes for this resource, and we can, of course, perform some liability management to be able to reduce the cost of capital. But this is the intention, of course, and we want to bring in a lot of liquidity to the company. We really like having a cash position that's really robust to be able to face any possible unexpected moments in the economy. Well, okay. The next point here is Rafael Augusto. Congratulations on the excellent work you've been developing. What's the expectation for the announcement of the next dividends? Well, this topic, as we disclosed some of the numbers, actually, so we've disclosed this on Monday this week, and typically during the week or in the beginning of the next week, the board will be discussing the distribution of dividends. So in the next days, the board will be discussing this based on the policy for dividend distribution. And what we'll see this week it's probably going to happen at the beginning of this week or next week at most. And so what we have here is still not considered, but really how the company is looking at the level of leverage in the short and midterm, and what would be the ideal for the long term. And so the truth is that we have been working with a maximum leverage of 2.5 times in normal periods and up to 3.5 times in investment periods. So where you still have not captured the returns on those investments performed. So we should be working on this within these limits, 2.5 times in normal periods and 3.5 times in investment periods. On the other hand, we've been trying to, even in investment periods, be below 2.5 times so that we can continue to have this policy on dividends, paying a 50% payout every year. We think this is very important and could, of course, help with the access to the capital markets and the payment of robust dividends in this policy we've defined. So to objectively answer this 2.5 times as of our target, and of course, it could reach 3.5 times, but always considering this issue with the dividends and the need to perform that investment at that moment. Maybe at moments where the value of the investments are a little higher, we could be a little higher than 2.5 times, but nothing we're looking at in the short-term period. So Paulo, and is there any news you could give us on the new cycle of investments? And we still don't have anything very objective in regards to this. We're setting many different possibilities, and with some other support from Reuters, again, and even from a perspective of improvements in the current machines and productivity gains, which would represent some new projects in the Gaia platform. But everything's kind of on the table. We're setting this and going deeper into this. And as soon as we have the projects approved, we're going to be disclosing this to the market. So Alexandre and Sarah are also discussing this. Congratulations on the results and the excellent IR department. Irani, could you talk about some possible expectations for efficiency gains and cost reductions, especially with investments in the startups? And Alexandre is also adding on to that, and he says, in order to estimate the correct value of the company, can you tell us when we should consider that the results will be completely incorporated in the cash flow as well, for an improvement in the EBITDA margin regarding Gaia? Could you consider an increase of 7 or 8% in the margins? Well, you don't disclose the forecasts, Alexandre, so and projections, and of course, the returns are taking place as the markets become more mature, and we should have the 3 main projects. And we should always look at this because the Gaia platform, of course, has many other projects, and other projects will be approved as well within this concept of the optimization of the current platform, which is the Gaia platform concept. But the 3 main projects should have returns being captured from the second semester onwards. So he also talked about gains in efficiency and cost reductions, especially when it comes to investments in startups. Well, investments in startups, we have 2 different vehicles, the Irani Labs, and that's our main way to access this startups ecosystem. With some challenges we launched to the market, we've already launched 2 editions of the Irani Labs. We'll probably have a 3rd one. And this is, of course, a process where the company defines some challenges, and any startups that have projects that could contribute to this are sign up and they can be selected. So these are very successful after they develop some proofs of concept and adapt solutions for the specific reality in Irani, and eventually Irani can accelerate some startups for Irani Labs. If it is of their interest, we can, of course, support these startups as well. And then we have some other Irani Ventures, which is another project where you have startups that really do have business that could be interesting for the company, that are in line or complementary to the current ones, that could leverage our current business in the company. And so then we're selecting some of these startups, and we're kind of betting on the ones we understand would be have the biggest potential for results. Perfect. Well, so the issue with efficiency and cost reduction is something that's very important. We should have these initiatives at all times, and we're always trying to adapt these budgets and bring them into the base zero concept or methodology. And we, of course, are facing an inflationary environment, which makes everything a lot more challenging, searching for cost reductions. But it's a topic that for the industry like ours is always considered, and we've always tried to work on this in our day-to-day activities in the company. We've been working a lot towards this, and even the maintenance capex as well, that we approved with series of projects annually for the company, as well as small projects. But we're always looking at this return on cost reduction and productivity gains, as well as increases in capacity. And there are some, of course, that don't have returns, such as infrastructure, etc. But most of the maintenance projects have always led to some expectation for return so that we can approve them. Well, Giovanni here, we have another 2 or 3 questions. Giovanni Pasquale, how's it going? He says, what's the expectation for the price of the scraps? Well, this is also a prognosis. It's difficult because the scraps are volatile, but until what we can observe as a stability period here, we don't see any phenomenon that could change this. Much to the contrary, as you have more virgin fiber paper being produced, you also have more paper and availability for scraps in the market and less of a need for scraps as the companies that produce virgin fiber don't really need this. So we did have a cycle for decompression in the scraps due to the new capacities coming in from clubbing and other machines. And so we're seeing this cycle of scraps. And if we take a look at the overall world, the price of the scraps had a drop that was very strong. And this is now related to the demand and the markets, and there is availability as well, which of course impacts the overall market. And we can always reopen this flow of imports for scraps if necessary to keep up a balance. So this volatility that of course affected the pandemic should not be reflected in normal periods. Well, Danielle from Santos Torres, he's asking about how we're looking at these changes into more sustainable packaging. Are you prepared for these changes? This is a challenge with the paper industry all around the world, where you need to substitute other raw materials with the same features. And then, of course, you have innovation factors, but you always have this bottleneck regarding the additional capacity and increase in capacity for the paper industry, which is more difficult because it involves forests, it involves a new paper machine, and the decision for the investment in this new paper machine is always a decision that is really based on a consistent demand and that is foreseeable. So when I look at the industry preparing for this, I see that they're following a pace that's maybe not as quick as the market would like it to be, but there is a strong demand, and this makes the sector very attractive in the short and midterm. And so the demand we're looking at for is very strong, and so other uses that we've never imagined. But industry can never respond to this demand with the speed the market has. So this, of course, well, paper is at a price that's even higher due to this structural change in the market we see. Well, we have our last question from Rafael also. And he said, look, I saw the controllers perform substantial sales in the last month. Could you explain why? This is related to the monetization and this is, of course, to work with commitments in the other companies in the group. So it's a matter of liquidity. There's really no sign. Well, it's a need for resources to be able to handle other commitments that the company has. That's it. All right, guys. We also have Paulo thanking us for transparency. Well, thank you, everyone. And I think that's pretty much it. We covered everything. Well, guys, thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you guys again. I think things are moving along very well within what we planned for the company. Investments in the Gaia platform, despite the complexity for the management of these investments, especially when you're looking at a existing factory, there's some challenges, but everything is moving along as expected with teams that are very committed and within the deadlines we disclosed to the market. So we're very confident and happy with the results and consistency in these results and expectations of very good results in the next quarters. Thank you so much for your presence, everyone, and thank you to the directors. They've been working on different initiatives in their different areas. That's all been very great, and it's really nice to observe the dynamics in the company as a whole. Very well. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Take care. Goodbye. Thank you.